April 1943. 03:42 hours. North Atlantic, mid-ocean convoy gap. The sea is black and restless. Wind claws at the destroyer's bow, throwing cold spray across the deck. Somewhere ahead, the convoy pushes on, slow, vulnerable silhouettes swallowed by darkness. Somewhere below, the Atlantic hides whatever has been stalking them all night. On the bridge, the U.S. destroyer commander studies the water without binoculars. He doesn't need them. Inside the ship, alarms are muted. No running lights, no unnecessary movement. This is the quiet part of escort duty, the long stretch where nothing happens, and that's exactly what makes it dangerous. Down in the sonar room, a contact flickers. Not clean. Not strong. Just a patch of uncertainty that refuses to disappear. Possible contact, the sonar officer reports, weak, bearing fluctuating. The commander glances at the plot. It's not impressive, not enough to justify excitement, exactly the kind of return doctrine says to verify once, then move on. Standard spacing. Measured drops. Conserved charges. That's what Navy command expects. The commander doesn't respond right away. He watches the wake peel away behind the ship, white against black water. He listens to the engines. He thinks about the last conv, how a ship vanished without warning, how oil spread where nothing should have been. Run another pass, he says. The ship turns. The sonar contact wavers, then tightens. Contact holding, the sonar officer says, surprised. Relative movement minimal. That's not normal. Marine life drifts. Wreckage sinks. Currents slide. This is staying. The commander's jaw tightens. He knows what doctrine says, 1 or 2 drops, wide spacing, assess results. Anything more is wasteful. Depth charges are precious. Escorts aren't supposed to carpet the ocean on a hunch. But something feels wrong. Not urgent. Persistent. How big is the contact area, he asks. Hard to say, sir, the sonar officer replies. Echoes smeared, like it's not one clean point. The commander looks back at the plot. Smeared means uncertainty. Uncertainty is where submarines survive. He makes his decision. Rig full pattern, he orders. There's a pause on the bridge. Full pattern means tight spacing, overlapping shockwaves, no gaps, no patience. It means expending charges faster than command likes and explaining it later if there's anything left to explain. Sir, the executive officer says carefully, that's outside standard doctrine. I know, the commander replies, that's why we're doing it. Below deck, depth charge crews move fast, safeties are pulled, settings are dialed shallow, then deeper. The stern racks are loaded edge to edge. The destroyer accelerates slightly, lining up over the uncertain patch of sea. The sonar officer swallows. Contact still there. Good, the commander says, drop. The first charge rolls free. Then another. Then another. The ocean behind the destroyer erupts, not in a single explosion, but a sequence. Columns of water punch upward. The sea seems to convulse, surface rippling violently as shockwaves overlap beneath. The ship shudders as if it's running over rough ground. Continue, the commander says, no pause. Maury charges full. The Atlantic starts to behave strangely. Water churns where nothing should be, bubbles rise in sheets. The surface trembles as if something enormous is pushing upward from below. On the bridge, men lean forward without realizing it. Then someone shouts, "Sir, oil!" Dark streaks spread across the waves, not one slick. Several. And beneath them, the sea begins to boil. Not from heat. From force. From pressure suddenly released. The commander stares down at the water, heart pounding, not with triumph but disbelief. This wasn't supposed to happen. One contact was expected. What's coming up now suggests something far worse and far more decisive. The destroyer slows instinctively. No order is given, but everyone on the bridge feels it. The sea behind them is no longer behaving like open water. Oil slicks overlap. Debris bobs to the surface in pieces too large, too deliberate to be coincidence. The sonar room erupts with voices. Multiple returns. Contacts separating. Sir, there's more than one down there. The young sonar officer's screen is no longer smeared. It's crowded. Where there was once a vague, uncertain patch of noise, there are now distinct shapes pulling away from each other, slow, damaged, disoriented. The shockwaves have done what precise spacing never could. They have broken concealment. On the bridge, the executive officer turns toward the commander, disbelief plain on his face. Sir, that's not possible. The commander doesn't answer. He's staring at the water. A shape breaks the surface briefly, dark, curved, unmistakable, then slips back under as if ashamed of being seen. Moments later, another disturbance. Moory bubbles, moory oil. Submarines. Plural. They were stacked. Running close. Sharing space. Trusting depth and silence to protect them. The commander understands immediately what doctrine never considered. Standard spacing assumes a single target. It assumes clean geometry. It assumes isolation. But wolfpacks don't always operate politely. Sometimes they compress, sometimes they overlap, sometimes they hide inside the same uncertainty. And overlapping uncertainty, when saturated, becomes revelation. Hard rudder, the commander orders, bring us back across the slick. The destroyer turns sharply, wake slicing through oil and foam. Depth charge crews scramble again, adrenaline replacing doubt. There is no talk of conservation now. This is exploitation. Shallow pattern, the commander says, they're stunned. Another series of charges drops. This time, the sea answers immediately. A violent surge of bubbles roils the surface. A pressure wave snaps across the stern. Something large breaches, not fully, just enough for men on the bridge to see steel where there should be none. A submarine's conning tower. It vanishes again, but not before the commander sees damage. Dents, bent railings, something torn open. Mark that, he shouts. The sonar officer's voice cuts in, tight with excitement and fear. Sir, one contact losing depth control, rapid ascent. Seconds later, a U-boat bursts partially from the water like a wounded animal, bow high, stern dragging. Men spill onto the deck instinctively, stunned, blinking in the cold night air. No one fires. No one speaks. This has never happened before, not like this. The submarine settles back, half-submerged, engines dead, smoke venting weakly into the night. Another dark shape surfaces farther off, lower, slower, barely visible through spray and oil. The sea is no longer hiding them. It is giving them up. The commander finally exhales. Navy Command called his pattern wasteful. They never imagined the ocean could be forced to confess. For several seconds, no one moves. The bridge crew stares at the half-submerged U-boat as if it might vanish again if they blink. The Atlantic, moments ago an empty void, is now crowded with proof, oil, debris, steel, men. Doctrine has nothing to say about this. There is no page in the manual for multiple submarines forced to the surface by shock saturation. No checklist for a sea that suddenly gives up everything it was hiding. The commander is the first to recover. All guns hold fire, he orders. It's instinctive. These submarines are crippled, stunned, exposed. Firing blindly now risks confusion, friendly fire, or missing something more important. Control matters. The surfaced U-boat drifts, listing badly. Its deck is slick with oil and seawater. German sailors cling to railings, some dropping flat as if expecting shells at any second. They look less like hunters now and more like survivors of a wreck. Farther off, another dark shape struggles upward, only the curve of its hull visible before it settles again, barely afloat. The sonar room is chaos, but disciplined chaos. Third contact still submerged, the sonar officer reports, depth unstable, movement erratic. 3. The number settles heavily on the bridge. This was never supposed to be possible. Wolf packs were assumed to spread, to operate with space between boats. That assumption shaped everything: spacing, charge settings, pursuit patterns. And now it is dead. Bring us across the slick again, the commander says. Tight turn. The destroyer answers, engines biting hard. The ship passes close enough to the surfaced U-boat that men can see dents in the pressure hull, seams weeping oil, deck fittings twisted out of alignment. That boat is finished. The third contact is. Stand by one more pattern, the commander orders. Medium depth, no gaps. Depth charge crews don't hesitate. There is no talk of waste anymore. The sea has already paid back the cost. Charges roll free. The explosions feel closer now, not just heard, but felt through the deck. The destroyer trembles as overlapping shockwaves punch downward again, compressing water into something solid and violent. Then silence. A long, dangerous silence. The sonar officer leans forward, breath held. Contact breaking up, he says finally. Structural noise, then nothing. Moments later, a fresh slick spreads to the surface, separate from the others. Smaller, thinner, but unmistakable. 3 submarines. One pattern. The commander grips the rail, knuckles white, not from fear, but from the realization settling in. This wasn't luck. This was physics. Shockwaves don't care about doctrine. They don't respect neat spacing or assumptions about isolation. They propagate, overlap, amplify. What Navy command called wasteful wasn't waste. It was saturation. And saturation has just rewritten the rules. The surfaced U-boats begin signaling weakly, lamps flickering, flags raised. Surrender comes without ceremony. There is no pride left to protect. The sea has stripped it away. As prisoners are taken aboard and scuttling charges set, the commander looks back at the boiling water where it all began. One decision. One deviation from the book. And the Atlantic, for the first time, has revealed just how fragile the enemy's confidence really was. Dawn creeps in slowly, gray and reluctant. The Atlantic looks calmer now, too calm for what just happened. Oil slicks stretch thin across the surface, broken by debris and the dark outlines of crippled submarines riding low in the water. Steam rises faintly where cold sea meets hot metal. The destroyer idles among them. German sailors are pulled from the water, hands numb, faces blank with shock. They do not resist. They do not argue. Most of them are still trying to understand how they ended up here, alive, exposed, and surrounded, when doctrine promised they would never be found this way. On the bridge, the commander watches quietly. This isn't triumph. It's confirmation. The executive officer approaches, voice low. Sir, command's going to ask why we expended so many charges. The commander nods. He expected that question long before the first U-boat surfaced. They can ask, he says. We'll answer with results. Below deck, damage control teams inspect the destroyer. The ship has taken no hits, not even a near miss. The sea absorbed everything meant for the enemy and gave something back in return. The sonar officer is still at his station, headset resting around his neck now. He keeps replaying the moment when the contact smeared, then split, then multiplied. He had never been trained to expect that outcome. No one had. Standard doctrine assumed clean problems with clean solutions. One contact, one target, one answer. But the ocean doesn't obey paperwork. Wolf packs compress, currents distort sound, pressure bends steel, and shockwaves don't stop politely where diagrams say they should. The commander realizes something unsettling. This tactic didn't just work because it was aggressive. It worked because it ignored assumptions. That makes it dangerous, not to the enemy, but to doctrine. Messages are sent, coordinates logged, prisoners transferred. Scuttling charges are set on the ruined submarines, sending them back down, this time by choice. As the last U-boat slips beneath the surface, the sea finally goes still again. But the stillness feels different now. Not empty. Exposed. The commander turns the ship back toward the convoy. Escort duty resumes. The Atlantic stretches ahead, wide and cold and familiar. And yet, something fundamental has changed. The ocean has learned that it can be forced to reveal what it hides. And once that lesson is learned, it doesn't stay isolated for long. The convoy reaches open water by mid-morning. To the merchant crews, the night is already fading into routine. Another tense passage survived, another sunrise earned. They will never know why 3 submarines never attacked. They won't read the log entries or smell the oil that still clings faintly to the escort's deck. But far from the Atlantic, in offices where doctrine is written, the night refuses to stay quiet. The destroyer's after-action report lands on a desk 2 days later. It is concise, professional, unemotional. It lists expenditure totals that immediately draw attention. Too many depth charges, too tight a pattern, too little regard for conservation. Every line seems to confirm exactly what Navy Command had warned against. Until the annex. 3 submarines destroyed or forced to surface. Multiple confirmed oil slicks. Prisoners taken. No damage to escort. The numbers don't align with the criticism. Senior officers read the report twice, some a third time. The language is careful, no claims of genius, no grand conclusions, just a description of what happened when saturation replaced spacing. One admiral circles a sentence and underlines it. Contact area exhibited multiple overlapping acoustic returns, once shock pattern applied. That line bothers him, because it suggests something uncomfortable. That doctrine, carefully refined, logically sound, was built on assumptions that may not survive contact with reality. Another officer points out the obvious risk. If every escort starts dumping charges like this, we'll run out of ammunition. The response comes quietly. If they don't, someone says, they'll keep running out of ships. No immediate changes are ordered. That's not how navies work. Doctrine doesn't bend overnight because of one report, no matter how dramatic. But copies are made. The report is circulated, discussed in wardrooms, brought up cautiously during briefings, always with a disclaimer. An isolated case. Unusual conditions. Not yet repeatable. Yet escort commanders remember it. Especially the ones who have watched contacts smear, fade, and escape again and again. Especially the ones who have felt the frustration of doing everything right and still losing ships. The idea spreads quietly. What if the ocean isn't empty between pings? What if uncertainty is where submarines stack and hide? What if shock, applied without patience, forces truth to the surface? Out on the Atlantic, another escort faces another weak contact. This time, the commander hesitates less. Rig a tighter pattern, he says. No one argues. The first charges fall. And the sea answers again. By the end of 1943, the Atlantic no longer behaves the way it used to. Not because submarines vanished. Not because escorts became reckless. But because uncertainty stopped being tolerated. Saturation patterns do not replace standard doctrine, but they become an option, a last resort, a tool used when contacts refuse to resolve, when the ocean seems to be hiding something too carefully. And when they are used, The results are unsettling. Submarines are stunned, forced shallow, driven into each other's space. Shockwaves strip away the protection of depth and silence. Wolf packs learn, too late, that clustering multiplies risk instead of reducing it. German commanders feel the change almost immediately. Attacks grow harder to coordinate, escorts stay longer, the sea no longer absorbs mistakes quietly, depth becomes dangerous, proximity becomes fatal. What Navy command once called wasteful turns out to be decisive, not because of distraction alone, but because of psychology. U-boat crews learn to fear the moment when escorts stop being patient. Because patience can be survived. Saturation cannot. The destroyer commander never becomes famous. His name appears in reports, then disappears into archives. He returns to escort duty, just another officer in a war full of them. But his decision leaves a mark. It proves that the Atlantic can be forced to betray what it hides. That doctrine is only safe until reality proves it incomplete, and that sometimes the difference between failure and revelation is the willingness to ignore the book just once. Navy Command said his depth charge pattern was wasteful. The sea disagreed. And when it boiled, it gave up 3 submarines in exchange for a single night's certainty. From that moment on, the Atlantic stopped protecting those who relied on its silence. It had learned a new rule. Pressure applied without pause changes everything. Atlantic Ocean, same night. The shockwaves don't end when the explosions stop. Deep beneath the surface, far from the boiling water above, another U-boat crew lies pinned in silence. They were not part of the original cluster, at least not intentionally. They were running parallel, maintaining what doctrine said was a safe separation. They felt the pressure anyway. Inside the hull, gauges twitch. Men look at each other, confused. No depth charges were meant for them. No contact had been reported nearby. Yet the sea shook. The commander orders a depth check. Everything appears nominal until the second wave hits, not as violent, but enough to confirm something terrifying. Shock doesn't respect spacing. The crew realizes the truth before command ever will. When escorts saturate an area, no submarine nearby is truly safe. They cut engines, go silent, wait. Above them, the escorts move on. But the lesson stays. This U-boat survives the night, but it aborts its patrol days later. The commander cites unexplained pressure events in his report. German command marks it as stress, nerves, coincidence. They are wrong. What happened was not an anomaly. It was a preview. Weeks later, different ocean, different convoy. An escort commander reads the report from April 1943 again. He studies the language carefully, not the kill claims, but the conditions, smearing contacts, overlapping returns, oil appearing where logic said none should. That night, his sonar officer reports something familiar. Weak, uncertain, uncomfortable. The commander remembers the line Navy Command underlined. Contact area exhibited multiple overlapping acoustic returns. He orders saturation. Not full, not reckless. Enough. The result isn't dramatic. No submarines breach the surface, but the sonar picture collapses, contacts scatter, the convoy passes untouched. This happens again. And again. Across the Atlantic, escort captains don't talk about it officially. They talk in wardrooms, over coffee, between watches. When it feels wrong, hit it hard. Don't give them time. Make the ocean hurt. A pattern forms, not written but practiced. German command notices something else by late 1943. Wolfpacks stop working. Not because escorts are stronger, but because proximity has become dangerous. Boats that cluster too closely risk shared shockwaves. A single escort can now disrupt multiple submarines without ever seeing them. Spacing increases. Coordination suffers. Attacks become hesitant. Submarines that once hunted together now survive alone, or not at all. The Atlantic no longer rewards cooperation beneath the surface. It punishes it. This tactic does not win the Battle of the Atlantic by itself. What it does is remove the submarine's margin for error. Before a U-boat could survive being detected briefly, it could wait out one escort. It could trust the ocean to reset. Saturation denies that reset. It replaces hunting with pressure, precision with inevitability, escape with exhaustion. And exhaustion kills more submarines than explosives ever did. By the time historians explain why German U-boats lost control of the Atlantic, they list technologies: radar, sonar, aircraft, code breaking. What they rarely list is mindset. The moment escorts stopped asking, "Is it worth it?" and started asking, "What if we don't stop?" That night in 1943 proved something dangerous. That the sea could be forced to give up secrets. That doctrine could be wrong. And that pressure, applied without mercy, could expose even the deepest hiding places. Navy Command said the pattern was wasteful. They were thinking in numbers. The ocean was thinking in physics. And when it boiled, it rewrote the rules beneath the waves. End.